because I've been to the mountaintop. All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. Let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal.
Hi, I am Carolyn R. Coleman, Councilwoman for the District 10. We're here today continuing our Dr. Martin Luther King series. Today I have two special guests, Pastor Dale Flowers and Professor Terrell Johnson. Reverend Dale W. Flowers is the pastor of New Sunlight Baptist Church located in the Mid-City area of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and also the Redwood Baptist Church that's located in Zachary, Louisiana. He's the director of the T.J. Jemison Baptist Student Center near the campus of Southern University here in Baton Rouge. He's also the president of the McKinley Senior High School Alumni Association. Professor Terrell Johnson is a professor in the history department at Southern University here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He received his bachelor's degree from Grambling State University and his master's degree from Southern University. Currently working on his PhD in public policy at Southern University. He is a member of the Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity as well as Grambling State University Alumni Association, the McKinley High Alumni Association, and the Southern University Alumni Association. And so I say welcome to you, and now here we are. Talk to me, Reverend Flowers, about your earliest remembrance. You know, we always talk about where we've been, where we are, and where we're going.
Yeah.
Talk to me about your earliest remembrance, those things that just resonate in your soul.
My earliest remembrance of Dr. King is my parents had this huge portrait of Dr. King that hung over the mantle. I mean, it was huge with gold frame with the big light on the top of it set up, and it hung over the mantle in the den. And I thought it was my stepfather because it looked like my stepfather. I was like, well, that's Reggie. I didn't connect that with being Dr. King, until, maybe, I don't know, 8, 9 years old, honestly. I was 4 years old when he was assassinated, and I'd heard about him, but there was no connection there. Memories of him beyond that portrait is just to hear people talk about Dr. King and the things that he fought for, and why we were in the position that we were in, because he and others, just fought and kicked and screamed and marched and sat at lunch counters and did whatever that needed to be done so that we can enjoy the freedom that we enjoy today.
Great. And so that was kind of a point there. That picture had a purpose. A purpose there for sure. Yeah. I guess that may have been part of our problem now. We removed the picture. We removed the picture.
Yes, ma'am.
Professor Johnson, share with me your earliest remembrance of Dr. King.
Yes, ma'am. First of all, I want to start off by thanking you for allowing me to be here on your show. My earliest remembrance of Dr. King, I would have to say, would be in my formative years in elementary school. I think I've always been a student of history. You remember when your parents would have encyclopedias. This is pre-internet and Google. You would have to go to the encyclopedias, and we were fortunate enough to have a set of encyclopedias. As a young boy, I would often just go through the encyclopedias. In fact, I'm deviating a little bit, but I remember when Roots came out, and I told my mom I had this 8th grade history book, and I was like, I'm going to find out where we're from. So I put all that thing together. But around that same time, I was exposed to the teachings of Dr. King and what he had done. So I'm going to say probably around 7 or 8 years old, I began to hear rumblings about the greatness of Dr. King and his contribution to blacks at large.
And so, Pastor Flowers, when you think about yourself and who you are and what you represent and what you do, talk to me about your view of Dr. King, but the similarities that you would you see.
Yeah, my view of Dr. King is quite different from what America teaches us through its propaganda machine of who Dr. King was and what he stood for. I see Dr. King, as a matter of fact, at the time of his death, he was the most hated man in America. But you would know that, you know, listening and hearing about him today, and you know, this great dream of his. And he had that dream, and he was working towards that dream. But I see the Dr. King who realized that that dream had turned into a nightmare. And he said as much, you know, speaking about those 4 young girls who were murdered in Selma, Alabama, in the 68, I think, church it was there. So the more he worked and he saw folks working against him, Dr. King was really trying to save America's soul. Dr. King was trying to save white people from going to hell. And folks don't see that. But he was saying, okay, if you say that Christ is your Savior and you say that Jehovah is your God, well, the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God, all your heart, all your mind, all your soul. Then to love your neighbor as you love yourself. Because they were operating in hate. Hate against those of us whose skin color was quite different from theirs. And that was a construct that they had made up themselves. He said, no, America must live up to what her principles, her founding principles are, which is liberty and justice for all. If that is who America is, then white people have to stop hating. Black people have to operate in love. Don't fight their hate with love, but you operate with love as we obey the first and the second of the greatest commandments. So I see Dr. King as one who was not, towards the end of his life, realized that, you know, America had a problem, and it was going to take quite a while for this problem to be really dealt with. It was a cancer that was eating away at America that continues to eat away at America today. America's problem, or America's fall, he recognized, would not be from the outside, but it would be from within. And if we don't deal with that even to this very day, America's downfall is not people at the border. America's downfall will not be some army from some foreign country coming to America. America's downfall will be the 3 things that Dr. King talked about: racism, materialism, or economic exploitation, and militarism. Those 3 things. You can take everything that's wrong in this country and they will line up under one of those 3 evils that he calls. So I see him as a man who worked to try and save this country's soul, if this country indeed has a soul. That was his push. It is my push today, the similarities. Dr. King also believed that if you're going to represent God, you got to do a whole lot more than save people's souls. The black church then, and a segment of it now, is concerned with saving souls, but that's it. Let's just get you saved, and then what? What happens between your salvation and until you get to heaven? And the black church then, and some of it now, that was their only concern. And so the black church, again, we look back at King and we, see him with these, rose-colored glasses. The church was against King to a large extent. Dr. King was J.H. Jackson, who was the president of the National Baptist Convention at the time. He and Dr. King did not see eye to eye, because his idea was, again, let's save souls and we'll get you to heaven. And Dr. King was, no, there's so much more. When we look around and we see our brothers and sisters in the condition that they're in, when we see blacks being treated as second or even third-class citizens, the church has to do something. The church has got, if we're going to walk with God, we got to love God's people enough, enough to move forward with liberty, as America says, and justice for all. His thing was justice, righteousness and justice is one and the same. And that's my view of Christianity. That's my view of being a minister of the gospel. It is to be concerned about the whole man, not just his or her soul, but the life that they live for as long as they're here until you get to heaven.
Yes.
What are we going to do about
That's it.
life now?
That's it. That's it. Well said. You know, I'm just reminded of that song that said, "Heaven right here on earth."
There you
know,
go. That's
heaven
it.
right here on earth.
We should have a peace.
That's right. That's it. Well said. Professor Johnson, come on, tell me something. Tell me something good. The similarities of yourself and Dr. King, or your view of Dr. King.
I think I will begin with my view of Dr. King. First of all, I want to jokingly correct Pastor Flowers that the bombing occurred in Birmingham.
Thank you.
At
Thank
18th
you.
Street Baptist Church.
Okay.
So that's just poking fun at my brother.
Yes, sir.
But Dr. King is a major cog in the wheel that rolls to bring about enfranchisement for blacks here in America. I think that overall, Dr. King's mission, Dr. Flowers eloquently said a lot of things that relate to Dr. King and what he did. But one of the things that jumps out to me about King's early mission is that when he came here to Baton Rouge, he came here to talk with Dr. T.J. Jemison to address the bus boycott of 1953, June 19th, as a matter of fact, to come to get a model or understanding of what we were doing to make changes for our people here. So he took that to Montgomery, and they gravitated and grew from that. But overall, I like to use, when I explain to my students, I call it my anatomical example. The human body as a whole has several moving subsets: skeletal system, circulatory system, digestive system, and all these systems work for the greater good of the whole body, the whole person. So is the system that operates here in America. There are different branches of the system that works to ensure that the system stays intact and addresses the agenda of the system. Anything that operates outside of that normalcy will be considered a disease or a cancer. So Dr. King fought within the best of his means and what he had to bring about change, but I think that at some point, Dr. King was a more acceptable view to place before the people. There were others out there that were working in the killing fields to bring about change for our people, but early on, Dr. King, with the passive, nonviolent, love your enemy position, that kind of became acceptable to talk about. Although he was called a communist, amongst other things, they slandered him in multiple ways, but he still was a great man, and to the best of his ability, he did what he could do with the nonviolent movement, being following Gandhi's theory of nonviolence. But overall, I really feel that the dream that King talked about and perpetuated, as Dale said, at some point it became a nightmare, because if I could quote Brother Malcolm, if it's appropriate, that the dream of having a desegregated bathroom or a desegregated water fountain where you can just go use the bathroom with white folk, that's not really a dream per se, jokingly. But King began to realize the nature and the power of economics with this thing. That was what the bus boycott was about. Capitalism, a capitalistic system which respects money. You have an exploited class and a class that's doing the exploiting. So King fought vigilantly to bring about change in that area, and it was a sad day when his demise came about in Memphis. So overall, King was a great man. He had some faults as a human, which we all do, but the system was so stacked against Dr. King that ultimately he couldn't get us to the finish line.
And you know, when you say getting us to the finish line, you know, I think of life as being you're holding a mantle and you do all that you have been called to do. And when you get to that line, then you pass that mantle. And then folk got to be ready with their hand open to get that mantle and finish running this race. And so, as you said, we're not finishing. On that note, I'd like to ask Pastor Flowers, where did we go wrong? Where do you feel? Where do you feel that we actually went wrong, got off course, missed the mark, missed the mantle, the whole 9 yards?
Well, I'm going to quote another king, and I'm going to paraphrase Coretta Scott King.
Okay.
And what she said was, freedom is never, really won. Every generation must continue to fight for freedom. And I think that's where we went wrong. We stopped fighting.
Stop fighting.
We were lulled to sleep on the accomplishments of those who went before us. And we started celebrating that. Hey, now I get a job at Exxon. Now I can, move out of this neighborhood where they have me locked in. Now I can go to some other school instead of the schools that have done an excellent job at educating us for all of those years. And we stopped fighting. We stopped. Okay, now we've got affirmative action. And everything that those who went before us fought for, we're losing it now. We're losing everything because we stopped fighting. And it's like every generation, our Caucasian brothers and sisters, they keep fighting. They don't ever stop fighting. There's a segment right now that's fighting to take back everything. That's fighting to keep us as second-class citizens, to move us back to the back of the bus, even though they don't even want to ride the bus now. So we went wrong when we stopped fighting. We went wrong when we just said, hey, we've made it. And when I say we, I'm talking about my generation. My generation who got to the point where we said, I'm not going to, simple thing that's raised my kids the way mom and them raised me. We stopped. There was some stuff that we left behind that we should have brought forward. There's some stuff that we brought forward that we should have left back there. But we stopped fighting. And it's honestly going to take this younger generation. I like what you were saying about the baton and what Dr. Thompson was saying. Dr. Johnson was saying, I don't know Dr. Thompson. Dr. Johnson was saying, this fight is not going to, the victory will not be won in our lifetime. And we have to realize that. We have to realize that it's about passing the baton on to the next generation. It's about us continuing this fight. We're not going to cross the finish line. Our finish line is when we leave this earth, but the fight goes on. So we need to make sure that every generation continues to fight. Pass the baton on. Don't become complacent. Don't think you've made it. Continue to fight. And that's what we've done.
That's it. And I'm just reminded of, it says that a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. And that is not it doesn't mean money, it doesn't mean houses or land, but you're talking about fight, good character, and so it's very important that we continue and keep in mind of where we've come from, not become complacent and all right with where we've come from, but realize that that's our springboard. And then that's what we must do, is spring forward.
And we've come a long way.
That's correct.
We have a long
ways to go. That is correct. That is correct. So, Professor Johnson, give me your take on where we went wrong and what we can really do. We've got to revitalize this dream, but where did we go wrong?
Excellent. I'm just sitting here thinking, and I'm enamored with what both of you have been saying. But as I sit here and reflect, I say that America promotes its heroes that rose up against England, against the Revolutionary War, and they called them patriots. They were willing to fight for their independence and their justice. And Patrick Henry, in fact, said, give me liberty or give me death. This is one of the things that we were taught in school. But yeah, I think Dr. King was able to see the blatant hypocrisy that was displayed before us. Pastor Flowers alluded to the fact of the Constitution. I think you said it too, that the cardinal document, the foundation of this society at large, is inundated with hypocrisy and racism. So you can cut the weed, but you have to pull the weed out the ground by the root. I'm not calling for a total physical destruction of America. That's not what I'm saying. But the system needs to be redone and readjusted. Dr. King, again, fought vigilantly, but again, we alluded to economics, and I want to quote Neely Fuller, who was a renowned historian, and he brought about the 9 areas of human interaction: education, entertainment, economics, labor law, sex, war, and politics. All of these areas, and he went further to say, if you don't understand racism, white supremacy, and a dominant culture, everything else will just confuse you. How those 9 areas of human interaction are working in conjunction to keep those who classify themselves as white in power. You alluded to the fact that we need to bring some things, let some things go, and we should have brought some things forward. But these people are working night and day to maintain their position, to maintain their power. And I asked my students, I said, who would want to switch? I said, do you think white America would say, okay, let's change positions. We live where y'all live and have what you guys have, and you guys have what we have. These people have fought vigilantly. And again, if I could quote Brother Malcolm, the brother said, how could so few white people control so many black people? The minority in the world who classify themselves as white are 1/10 of the world's population. They're not controlling it militarily, but they're controlling it through a system. And I keep getting back to the whole system component because that is so important. Until we are able to stand and create jobs and economic revenue streams for our people, we will never be competitive or able to overthrow or topple the system. Yes, some may get through, but the pole is greased. They say, see, we gave you a chance, but man, the pole is greased. I got up the pole and I slipped down, so that just deters other people from trying, so we become complacent. So again, Pastor Flowers made excellent points that address the situation that King brought about, but systemically, I think that's our major problem. In addition, I don't think that black folk are able to come together with a central platform. The powers that be have put us together with divide and conquer. We too busy arguing about who believes what religion, if you're going to heaven or hell, and all those things now when people are just running circles around us because we can't unify ourselves, galvanize ourselves on one platform for the goodness of our people. We have been unable to do that. I think until we come up with an agenda that a majority of the people agree on, we're going to continue to just spin our wheels in the mud.
Okay, all right. And so, from what I've gleaned from what you said is that we need to be mindful of distractions.
Yes, ma'am.
Those distractions, you're straining at an elephant there, you're straining at a gnat and miss an elephant.
Yes.
But we're looking with the distractions that are there. And then I also think of accountability. It's got to be embedded in folk, and that is you must be accountable. We've got to, and I agree with you, we've got to come together and we've got to have accountability embedded in that. Every fella, the old folks used to say every tub got to set on its own bottom. And then I think that is of utmost importance. I listen to folks say majority, minority, and then when they say minority, they refer to us. I refuse to let that word flow out of my mouth and call anybody of a darker hue a minority, because what that does, and I dare not gonna say it about myself, because in my opinion, what it does, it's telling me right then and there that I'm second-class citizen. I don't care if they get money based on saying you are a minority. I don't care if they are able to move through the system because of that. But I refuse to really accept and embrace that when we're saying that we've got to move on up, we've got to move on down. And so that's just my, my piece there. So we've been there, we've gotten here. So my question is, where do we go from here? And you alluded to it, Professor Johnson. But how do we get back on track, and where do we go from here, and what does it take? And we really need to keep these young people in mind as we think about the whole thing. So Pastor Flowers, share with us.
Well, and let me say, I'm in total agreement with Dr. Johnson. we come up together, so we call each other by our nicknames and whatnot. But the system was not designed to work for us. I mean, it never was. You look at, folks are complaining about the Supreme Court today. The Supreme Court over its years have always ruled against people of color. It's not about the system being broken. The system is doing what it's supposed to do.
Right.
It's not broken.
Right.
So we can't fix what isn't broken, and that's what we have to stop saying. We got to fix. No. It has to be torn down and rebuilt.
Yes, sir.
And that's what people don't want to hear. That's what people don't want to do, because, as Dr. Johnson has said, some have achieved, but it's the minority.
Right.
And when I say minority, I mean the amount of people.
Okay.
It's that divide and conquer. I'll let a few of you guys up.
Jimmy Lynch.
But there you go. The masses we're going to keep down.
Yes, sir.
The system is designed to keep us as second class. That's its design, is to exploit some and promote others. Some are supreme, others are inferior. And again, it goes back, for me as a believer in Christ, it goes back to the greatest commandment of the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. If we could do that, we can take care of everything else. Let's put a system in place that works for everybody. Now, what frightens our Caucasian brothers and sisters is they're afraid that if we get rid of this system, then we will turn around and do to them what their ancestors did to us. That's not the goal. Now, there's some who, they want to put their foot on their necks, and but we just want equality. And I think that was an area where we talk about Dr. King and those who fought for civil rights. They got caught up in that separate and equal part, but they got more caught up in the separation than they did the equality. So let's come together. Let's be, this true melting pot. Folks, some folks don't want to be in the pot with you. So let's be equal. You grew up in a time here in South Baton Rouge where this place was booming. Everything you needed.
Everything.
Stores, drugstores, doctors,
Dentists, everything.
Mechanics, everything, shoe stores was right here. It was contained. So let's be about equality. We have to build our own.
And again, gentlemen, I thank you. I thank you all for coming out and for sharing your areas of expertise, sharing your mindset, sharing all that goodness that you have, the transfer of information, and as we glean from each other, and as you say, just to be able to share, to know when to lean back and when to lean in order to learn from each other. I appreciate both of you, Pastor Flowers, Professor Johnson. I appreciate both of you.
Thank you.
And I say to the listeners out there, look for this and more on Channel 21, the Dr. Martin Luther King Legacy Series.